So I titled one of the sections of Father and Child Reunion as followed, a little bit of tongue-in-cheek: the Petri generation, questions that frozen embryos will soon be asking. And I want to share this part of that with you. I look at a Mary Sue Davis, who many of you remember is a major court case, and her husband used the eggs and sperm to create embryos in a petri dish. What I'm looking here is at the larger picture of, and here's the larger picture that I'm getting at. The larger picture is the belief that what we've been operating with in the last years is the belief that a woman's body is a woman's business. Because it's her body, it's her business, I am going to challenge that belief. I'm going to show why that belief is a fraud. And here is why it is a fraud. Mary Sue Davis and her husband used their eggs and sperm to create embryos in a petri dish. Then they filed for divorce. In a battle for custody of the embryos, the judge awarded the custody of all of them to the woman. The judge rationalized that although the embryos were only 4 to 8 cells, they were, quote, people. Had the judge considered the embryos property, everyone would have seen it as sexist to award them only to the mother. But the second they were ruled as people, we became blind to the sexism of awarding them only to the mother. We can see that the slogan, "Our bodies are business," is just a smokescreen, since we still assume the mother gets the child even when her body has not been used, as they weren't in that case. But it gets more unbelievable. The mother had supposedly received the embryos because she was the one who wanted to create children from them. The husband objected to her using them, but she won. However, both of them got remarried. And what happened? Their positions on this issue reversed. She no longer wanted to use the embryos to create children. He did. He got remarried to a wife who was infertile. Nevertheless, he still could not get the embryos, even though he was now in exactly the position that she was in that had allowed her to win the embryos. There could hardly be a case that could more completely prove the totality of the woman's right with regard to children, or anything else that might become a child. Let's look at another case that gives a complementary insight to this. Mr. and Mrs. Delzio's sperm and egg had created an embryo, not in a woman's body, but in a laboratory petri dish. But the hospital mistakenly destroyed the embryo. Mr. and Mrs. Delzio both sued for damages. The court awarded Mrs. Delzio $50,000 and awarded Mr. Delzio $3. When the embryo was in a petri dish, not in a woman's body, the woman's rights were still 15,000 times more important than the man's. She was awarded psychological damages also. He wasn't. Why? The law is designed to protect women more than men when it comes to parenting about 15,000 times more. So when hospitals sponsor ads to join the Petri generation, and when demographers tell us we have a frozen embryo boom, and when pro-embryo feminists claim that maternal custody is in the best interest of the embryo, there are a few questions the Petri generation will be asking. Questions like, why were daddies frozen out? Hang them on. Very good. These things deserve a little bit of humor before we can go a little. But ironically, the rights that will create men's rights, I've always predicted, will be whose rights? Women's. Example of this. In lesbian relationships, the National Center for Lesbian Rights and the ACLU consider it cutting edge, this is according to the New York Times, to support equal custody rights for the woman who was a parent figure, but whose womb was not used to carry the child. It took a woman battling a woman for feminist advocacy groups to consider it radical to advocate for the equal rights of a parent whose body was not being used. The most powerful example of this, though, the most powerful insight to the fraud is looking at surrogate mothering and looking at why surrogate mothering destroys the arguments that a woman's right to choose is based on the fetus being in her womb. In the baby M case, custody was not awarded to the woman who used her womb. It was not awarded even to the woman who used her egg. It was awarded to the person who made the contract for a lifetime commitment to the child. If feminists are in favor of women's right to choose, why have almost all feminist organizations been opposed to surrogate motherhood? After all, surrogate motherhood allows a woman who has something wrong with her uterus to still have a child. It allows a woman who cannot produce eggs to still have a child. It could allow the woman who feared she would jeopardize career advancement by becoming pregnant to have a surrogate mother bear the child, have her husband be the primary caretaker, and her the primary breadwinner. All the feminist ideals that I stood for as I was on the board of NOW are expanding women's options would seem to be enhanced by surrogate motherhood. Then why are feminist organizations opposed to it? Feminists saw that if a surrogate mother used her body and didn't have, quote, the right to choose, their whole argument that a woman's right to choose is based on the fact that her body is being used falls flat on its face. They saw that 99% of women were still using their own wombs, and that if using her womb could be made the basis of a woman's rights, this would leave, practically speaking, almost all women with the power to choose and men with none. It is ironic that a movement that made its reputation championing the irrelevance of biological differences when those differences were to women's disadvantage, immediately returned to biological determinism when those differences were mostly to women's political disadvantage. In surrogate parenting cases, courts have made it clear that the long-term commitment inherent in contracting out the birth of a child took precedence over the rights of the woman whose womb was actually being used. Since men and women can equally commit themselves contractually, this leaves them as equals. What threatened the feminist was what? Equality. And it goes beyond that. Mrs. Stern was awarded parenthood over baby M, even though she contributed nothing, neither the womb nor the egg. She got custody because she and her husband created the contract with the surrogate mother. So what I am saying is that all of this is a contract fight. That's exactly what I'm saying. The right to choose is not based on the womb, but on the intent of the contract. It is part of contract law. When a woman and man contribute a sperm or an egg to sex, they are the ones who created a contract of equal rights and equal responsibility. The fact that it is her womb being used does not increase her rights any more than it increases the surrogate mother's rights. As the female author of a book on surrogate mothers put it, if female hormones can be used as an excuse to break contracts, we will never have a woman in the White House. What I'd like to end with is looking at why surrogacy cannot be prohibited even by feminists. Surrogacy differs from abortion in that it increases options by creating life rather than increasing options by destroying life or potential life. Therefore, it'll be harder to stop the continuation of surrogacy than it will be to stop abortion. There's less emotional content involved in it, or birth control. It is also harder to stop surrogacy because it provides such a crucial option for a woman whose uterus is damaged, or for an infertile couple. If the state makes a law against surrogacy, it will merely drive the couple to another state. If the federal government makes a law against it, it will merely drive it underground to be done among friends. Laws against surrogacy will make criminals out of couples who want to create a family. In brief, prohibiting surrogacy is ineffective at best and dysfunctional at worst. But it's a political issue that we need to be able to look at, because if we look at it and highlight it, it'll make it so clear that the issue is not a woman's body, a woman's business.